Good afternoon and welcome back. We're at day number 5 of going through our NFL preview. I'm your host, Uncle Phil, and with me I have the Frixer. You guys are all aware of the Frixer now, and his impassioned view of the NFL, as well as his takes and what is meaningful to him when he's assessing teams. And look, man. Today it's a big day. Look, we covered the AFC South, and I think that we did that, and I thought we did a great job with that. Really excited about it, but it's hard not to say that the AFC West is not the star of the show in the AFC and potentially of the entire NFL. I mean, you look at these teams. Never have you had before a conference or a division where all 4 head coaches either have won Super Bowls or a national championship in college football. So, I mean, this is really remarkable to have. You've got great coaches, great quarterbacks. You've got a superstar and Mahomes. The quarterback who everybody thought would be the superstar, and Herbert, will he become that guy? Bo Nix, is he going to be the next Drew Brees, but yet bigger and more athletic than Drew Brees? Because Drew Brees wasn't as mobile as Bo Nix was. Bo Nix will lower his shoulder and run over a cornerback. It didn't have that ability for Drew Brees, but Drew Brees, again, was this high-level pre-snap processor. With Bo Nix, will Sean Payton turn Bo Nix into the next type of Drew Brees, because you kind of see that potential there. And then you got Geno Smith, who has, again, we talked about Baker Mayfield last time in the show, where he had been kind of left for the side of dead and then gone to Carolina and then kind of revived his career under McVay under a short term, and then gone to Tampa and kind of really become into his own there, was with all that talent. And, Geno Smith is, I wouldn't say on Baker's level, but a lot of his stats are pretty good. And so he has been a very good quarterback, played under Pete Carroll, revived his career under Pete Carroll. It'd be good to see the Raiders take a step up. We talked about the Bengals ownership, and their lack of funding is making them a very cheap organization, making them make bad term, short and long-term decisions for the franchise. Well, at least Mark Davis said, hey, let's bring in, with the NFL changing its rules about bringing in private equity and having other minority ownership come into play, brought in Tom Brady, brought in some other people that are helping to fund the team. They're injecting capital, because this was Mark Davis, that was a very poor ownership there. I mean, poor from just not financially poor. And so, again, forced them into some bad decisions. I think they're still paying John Gruden, the whole thing. They're paying Antonio Pierce. So a lot of things happening there that are doing that. But you certainly see Brady's stamp on things now, bringing in Pete Carroll, bringing in Geno Smith, how they're building this roster now. It's starting to take the shape of a professional organization. So, look, a lot of things to be excited about the South. We're going to be starting in alphabetical order, but once you start talking about these teams, it's hard not to talk about all of them. Let's start with Denver. What are your thoughts about the Denver Broncos, Sean Payton, Bo Nix, and just the talent that they brought in the offseason?
So they have a lot of talent. I was just going to say, I agree with you about AFC West. I mean, I think this is not, a hot take or anything, but, arguably against the NFC North, it's probably the best division in all of the NFL. And that makes it fun. It's really tight. But Sean Payton is so I don't know what we're going to get out of Bo Nix. He had a really strong rookie season. I mean, he was eclipsed by Jaden Daniels, but Jaden Daniels was all-time great rookie season. Bo Nix had a good rookie season, and I think the question to me is, how much of that was Sean Payton and how much of that was Bo Nix? And I think only time will tell about whether Bo Nix is the next Drew Brees. I tend to think not, but I tend to think that he may be good enough to help them win, especially since they may have one of the great defenses in the game right now. So Bo Nix might be good enough for them to win. And Sean Payton is going to get the most out of Bo Nix. And here's a little take. Bo Nix, even as a rookie, he had the sixth lowest sack rate in the NFL. And the reason that's important, and I don't think people stress this enough, is that a sack in the NFL is basically a punt. And people look down on interceptions, but I think if you look at an interception downfield, that's basically a punt with a call option of a completion or a pass interference, whereas a sack is basically just a punt with no call option. And Bo Nix had a very low sack rate, which is very good for a rookie. He's number 6 in the NFL. And the question is, was that a function of Sean Payton's offense, or is Bo Nix just naturally good at that? It's probably a combination, but I would say that whatever Bo Nix has, Sean Payton is going to get that out of him. And with their great defense, Denver could really be on the come.
Man, I love that take. I think that's really strong. I especially like that, I mean, look, there's no question that you have to, quarterbacks thrive in the right environments, right? You saw Caleb last year, and he was just a mess under a defensive head coaching scheme. I bet Caleb takes a big step forward. There's certainly some things that I've seen in preseason that I really like about Caleb's approach this year that are going to be different. But there's no question Sean Payton had an imprint on Bo Nix. That being said, how we talked about Anthony Richardson, Trey Lance, Mitch Trubisky, who didn't have as many starts in college, you look at a guy like Bo Nix, who's started, I think, more games than any other quarterback in college. And so you've had that experience. And so you can draw upon that experience and then just top that off with Sean Payton, probably one of the best play callers in NFL and potentially NFL history. That, there's no question that a lot of their success is on on Sean Payton or a lot of Bo Nix. But I mean, again, who they brought in this year, the defense should be one of the top. They should be top 5 in offensive line and in defensive line this year, which is going to be fantastic. Defense, they brought in Dre Greenlaw and they brought in Talanoa Hufanga. And, I mean, you've got them from San Francisco. San Francisco wanted to keep them, but they played Brock Purdy. And so when they did that, they couldn't play those guys. And in defense, you need guys that are just a little bit twisted where you're just like, I don't really know if this guy's serious or he's not. And Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga are those two guys where you want them on your team. You don't want to be opposing those guys because they will light you up. So I think it's an opportunity there. And I think this team last year, I don't think they were as good as their record showed. And certainly they got beat opening round of the playoffs. In the wild card, pretty good, by Buffalo. But, again, I think that was an amazing feat. They way overachieved any expectations their first year, again, battling the cap of what they had done with that poor decision with Russell Wilson. So for them to even be a bubble team, much less get in the playoffs, was way overachievement last year. And so this year they're still dealing a little bit of that. But again, tremendous opportunity for upside. Last year in one-score games, they were 1-6. Tremendous opportunity for upside regression there. But again, just straight up, not against the spread, but straight up, they were 8-0 against teams below 500. And so that's the teams you have to take care of business. And of course, when you have a coach like Sean Payton, he's not going to miss the layups, and he gets the layups. Now, they struggled against teams that were above 500. They were only 2-7 with those teams that were above 500. And again, one of those teams that you saw them beat in last season on Week 18 is they beat the Chiefs, and the Chiefs didn't play anybody. So that was kind of a misleading thing. So really, one win with teams above 100 or above 500 last year. So that's that's an opportunity for them to improve. But man, I like this team, and I think this team's got a real opportunity to be a massively surprising team this year. I think there's tremendous upside potential. I think Sean Payton prefers his quarterbacks under center. With Bo Nix last year, he let him play a lot from the shotgun because that's what he was comfortable about. But you're going to see that crank down this year. You'll see him a lot under center. You'll see a play action. You'll see more of Sean Payton's offense as it comes through. And I think this team has a chance to surprise some people. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I like your take about Bo Nix with his starts in college, because that apparently is the single best predictor of NFL success for quarterbacks, right? And what's interesting is that Bo Nix was the all-time leader, and Dylan Gabriel beat him out. Like apparently Dylan Gabriel's been knocking around a bunch of different teams in college, but Bo Nix is like number 2 all time. Guess who else is good? Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy comes in. Brock Purdy comes in. He's NFL ready. But basically, he's like, give me an offensive, scheme and game plan, and I can execute that for you because I've been doing it for 4 years. So I agree with you that Sean Payton loves Bo Nix, not necessarily for Bo Nix's upside. He loves Bo Nix because Bo Nix can run his damn offense, because Bo Nix is ready, because he's been running offenses for a long time, for years. And so the question is, what is Bo Nix's upside? And we won't know until we see it. But Peyton is going to get the most out of him. I agree with you that Denver has upside, and they may have one of the best defenses in the NFL. So yeah, I mean, we could get a surprising Denver Broncos team this year.
Well, I agree. And plus, they've got the running back they drafted that they just love, that R.J. Harvey. They think he's going to be fantastic. You see a lot of comparisons to that Saints team with him, with Marshawn Lattimore. People think he's going to be fantastic. So, will he be that guy? But I mean, Peyton loves a running back that can catch from out of the backfield. And R.J. Harvey apparently is this guy. So they're going to have a lot more weapons this year. It's going to be super exciting to watch this Denver team. Couldn't be more excited about it. But if they're going to do anything at all, they're going to have to play the bullies on the block, and those are the Kansas City Chiefs. What are your thoughts about the Kansas City Chiefs? I mean, it's hard not to you're like, okay, well, Kansas City just got blown out in the Super Bowl. Is that them just living dangerously last year? I mean, they were 11-0 in one-score games, NFL's all-time record. I mean, you do that. There's certainly opportunities for regression. Were they just living dangerously last year and it finally caught up with them, or did they just meet a bad matchup? What do you think?
I think, so I agree with you that like one-score games, I mean, that should regress and everything, but like sometimes there's a reason why, teams win, one-score games. And I think that's because like everything about that organization is clutch. And you can't denigrate a team for losing to the Eagles. I don't care how they lose, because playing the Eagles is like playing an all-star team. And the Kansas City Chiefs, if anybody had to beat a chance to beat the Eagles, it was the Chiefs, and they couldn't do it either, right? Because you're playing an all-star team, an all-time great roster. But no, they got Spagnuolo. He's always going to get the most out of the defense. Andy Reid is still one of the GOATs. And Pat Mahomes, man, I mean, like he's on a faster pace than Tom Brady. So yeah, he hasn't achieved what Tom Brady has achieved yet, but he's on a faster pace, and the guy is clutch, and he's not, I'm not sure what his QBR is. His QBR is high, but it's not in the top 10. But I mean, I rank him, in my opinion, let's see, his QBR is 8th overall in QBs. But in my opinion, he's top 3 just from the clutch aspects, that he always gets what he needs to get when he needs to get it, if that's possible to get, right? Unless you're playing the Eagles, right? Who just shuts down everything. So yeah, the Chiefs, until somebody beats them, they are the class of this division.
Well, they certainly have had their way with this. Again, feels like a lot of the NFC or the AFC East, where you've had Buffalo and then just a bunch of mess behind them the past few years. I feel like Kansas City's kind of had that, but now you've got Herbert, now you've got Bo Nix and Sean Payton, and you've got Jim Harbaugh in the league. Now you've got Pete Carroll. So you've got a lot more competition. This conference all of a sudden became a lot harder in the past year. We're going to see this. I mean, this is going to sound a little bit hot take, and this is going to ruffle somebody's feathers. But I'm not sure I feel the way that you do about, and most others feel the same way about Patrick Mahomes. Because with Tom Brady, we always wondered if it was Belichick or it was Brady. And then when Brady left, we knew it was clearly Brady at that time, right? Granted that Belichick had a lot of help, especially on defense. Those were amazing teams, and Belichick had that. But Brady was clearly carrying that team. He didn't have the weapons that he was working with. Had Gronkowski, but beyond that, you had Aaron Hernandez for a year, and the best you had beyond that was Randy Moss, and that was for a year as well. So, again, there was Brady did a lot of heavy lifting there, and so I kind of wonder that way about Mahomes. Mahomes, is it Mahomes or is it Andy Reid? And what the great offensive play callers do is they get their primary read open, and immediately, and those people are open, and that's what they do. But Vic Fangio found Mahomes' kryptonite, and that kryptonite for Mahomes, by only rushing 4, he forced Mahomes to hold the ball from over 3.3 seconds, and that's really the kryptonite for Mahomes. Is that typically when you have a quarterback, you want to put pressure on him because the more time you give him, the more he's just going to pick you apart. You don't want to give quarterbacks crazy amounts of time because the great ones will pick you apart. It is just the opposite with Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is now 1-4 in playoff games when he holds the ball longer than 3.2 seconds to throw the ball, which means to me is that Reid is getting him open or getting his primary read open. But once he has to go beyond that primary read, Patrick Mahomes turns very average. And for me, he is athletic. He is unbelievable. He's got a crazy arm. He's got all those things. But the ability to read and everything, that's on Andy Reid. It's getting his primary read open, and that's what's maximized his talent. I'm not saying Patrick Mahomes is average at all, because I think he's super talented, and regardless, top 10, regardless, all that, and maybe a lot higher. But, I do not think that he is in Brady's class at all. And I think it's Andy Reid who got Donovan McNabb to a Super Bowl. I think we're underselling Andy Reid.
So we haven't had a lot of opportunity to disagree, and I don't disagree much with you about this position, but I think we need to move off of is it this guy or this guy? Sometimes it's both guys, and I think in New England it was definitely both guys. I mean, I've read the Dynasty, so that's one great take on the whole dynasty of the New England Patriots, and then another book called It's Better to Be Feared. Both of them are long takes by journalists who covered them for a decade or more, and they're both great, and they both reached the same conclusion. It wasn't Brady or Belichick; it was Brady and Belichick, and the reason why Brady was able to go to Tampa Bay and still have success is because he went to a perfect situation. All Tampa Bay needed was a quarterback. That's all they needed. They had Jameis Winston before. He gives it to the other team. He throws it to the other team as much as he throws it to his own team. So all they needed was a quarterback, and Brady saw that, and Brady made the jump. And what Belichick was not good at was draft picks, and Brady, so he wasn't abandoning ship from Belichick, even though they had a tumultuous relationship. He was abandoning ship from a team whose talent level had dropped around him to a team who had nothing but talent, and all they needed was a quarterback. So I don't think we say that like New England was just Brady and not Belichick. It was Brady and Belichick, and then Brady made a great leap when the timing was right to go down and have some more success. So with Mahomes and Reid, I think it's Mahomes and Reid. I think Mahomes has shown his ability to be clutch. He's still top 10 in QBR. He adapted to the Fangio defense. It took him a little while. I mean, because he wanted, he's always wanting to dial up deep shots, and Fangio's defense caused him to have to be patient, and he had to adjust to that, and he has adjusted to it. And he's still a great quarterback. He's still clutch. It's Reid and Mahomes, and I still have a ton of respect for Mahomes. He's the last guy I like Lamar Jackson. Statistically, is the best quarterback in the NFL, and I would still rather face him than Mahomes in a championship game.
Interesting. See, I think part of Mahomes' secret sauce as well, and I think that's a great take of what you did, and I certainly appreciate that, and I think that brings a lot to our listeners as well. Is that Mahomes, the only thing that concerns me is that at his age, Father Time is starting to, because one of his secret sauces is his ability to scramble. And he is starting to slow a half step down on his scrambling. And he's not near as fleet of foot as he was. And everybody's kind of kidding him about his dad bod now and that he's, starting to get a little bit of a stomach on him. And he's starting to do that. So I think he's starting to do that. So I wouldn't be surprised at all is that in 5 years that you're going to say Mahomes was this great quarterback, but he is nowhere near in the class of Brady just because I think part of his secret sauce is the athletic ability of him. And I think that part is slowing down. And I think you're going to start to see other quarterbacks rise. We'll see. I want him to play as long as he can. I want them to be able to be as great as it can, as long as it can. And certainly Mahomes has been carrying a lot of water for the NFL and for Chiefs Kingdom for a while. And it's great. We'll see how it works out and see how it plays out. But that's kind of how I see it. I start to see some of that chink in the armor of what's happening. You talked about being patient. I feel like Mahomes was patient all year last year. He just didn't have that deep threat. Part of it was because his offensive line was just crap last year. The Chiefs were the only team in the NFL to average less than 3 air yards per completion last year. So certainly said something about their offense. It was kind of dink and dunk. Patrick Mahomes loves the deep ball, but it just didn't have the time or the receivers, didn't have the weapons on last year. Last year was kind of a mess, and yet they still managed to overachieve. They could potentially achieve the same record this year and just not be in as many one-score games. But I think the competition got a lot stiffer this year. We will see how it goes. But again, very frustrating team to bet for in the last year. They were 7-1 as favorites. They were 0-2 as underdogs. They were just kind of a tough team to figure out. They kind of they won, but it was not pretty. And you're always just like, how in the world do they get teams to slip on the banana peel at the last part of the game? And they just keep winning these games. And I felt like that kind of caught up with them. I'm interested to see, with Josh Simmons, the offensive lineman from Ohio State they drafted, they feel like that was still the draft. I've heard some people say it was Travion Henderson who's going to the Patriots. But a lot of people say it was Josh Simmons because he had that terrible, what you don't want to have in the offensive line, that patellar tendon injury. But supposedly he's healed and he is just a monster at that left tackle. You always wonder what a left tackle is going to be like as a rookie, but say that he's going to be just phenomenal. That being said, they did lose their emotional leader in Joe Tooney. He's gone. We'll see how that plays out for them as well. I think that could impact them. I just don't know. I mean, we'll see to do that, but I feel like that. I'm not selling all my Kansas City stock, but I feel like Kelsey's on his last year. There's some uncertainties on the offensive line for me this year. I feel like Mahomes is slowing down a tick, hitting 30. I think he's 30 this year. So I think there is something there that could potentially do that. We'll see.
Well, I agree with you on this. We disagreed on kind of like, but I agree with you that the surprise to the Chiefs is to the downside. If they're going to surprise, it's to the downside. So yeah, I mean, gosh, with the record last year, obviously it's there's nowhere to go but down.
Well, yeah, and they're just not the bullies of the block, and they still could be the bullies of the block of the AFC North and still win the division. But are they going to go 15-2 next year? With that division, with everybody's coming on better than they have been before. Now, obviously, we're going to get to it after this, but I mean, the Chargers had a lot of hopes this year, and then Rashawn Slater got hurt. So we'll talk about that. But first of all, in order, we have to talk about the Raiders. We're almost an afterthought of dead last in that division, but now have a little bit of life in them. They got Ashton Genty. They've got Geno Smith. who's just incredibly accurate. They've got Pete Carroll. They've got some life into it. Pete Carroll's teams, when he comes in, the knock on Pete Carroll is that after 3 or 4 years, his stories that he tells kind of become old because he says the same stories over and over again. But he's not going to be there 3 to 4 years. He's just going to be here. He may be there 3 years, but right now his stories are new, and teams typically play very energetic for Pete Carroll on his first year. So you got to feel like there's going to be a pop. And the Raiders have always been a tough out for teams. I mean, especially the Chiefs. They feel like that they always get the Chiefs at least once a year, no matter who they play at quarterback. And they've had some real stinkers at quarterback the past few years, but yet they always give them a hard time. It'll be interesting to see what they do this year. I think it's going to be fun. What do you think about the Raiders?
Not a lot of thoughts other than I think, I'm a Geno Smith truther or whatever. I think he's he's solid quarterback, NFL quarterback, underrated still. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's great, but he's good. I think and the other thing is their turnover margin differential was -16 last year. So, if you think about that regressing toward normal or toward zero, they could find 3 or 4 extra wins this year, and so they were a 4-win team last year. They could easily be an 8-win team just on turnover margin differential regression. Right. So they're not as bad as they seemed last year. Therefore, their potential is to the upside.
No, I totally agree. I mean, again, just 3 and 4 in 1-score games, so not a big, a ton of opportunity there, for regression. But the ones that you mentioned, there definitely is opportunity there. But again, I'm with you. I'm with Geno Smith. I'm a big time Geno Smith fan. I think he's got some bad raps around him. Look at Geno Smith. He was second league-wide last year behind Joe Burrow in on-target percentage and 4th in completion percentage over expected. And it's very accurate despite being behind a terrible offensive line last year. His offensive line finished 31st with only ahead of the Dolphins last year as far as that. And yet he still was extremely accurate. His 4th in completion percentage above expected. So I think there's an opportunity there to do that. Pete Carroll wouldn't have brought him in if he didn't think he could be a game changer for him. They're high on him. I think he's going to be good. We will see how they do. I'm excited to see how, Pete Carroll's going to change up their offense. He plays a lot of 11 personnel in preseason so far. He's played 11 personnel 98% of the time. Obviously, that's 1 tight end, 1 running back. And in the first half, it goes to about 44%. In the second half, when he's playing a lot of the non-starters. But again, he's telling you very clearly how he's going to play offense and how they're going to do. And I think this offense will be tailor-made toward Geno. I mean, their Vegas team total this year, Vegas is expecting them right at 6.5 games. Certainly think that's doable. They've got 4 primetime games. I can't remember the Raiders having that many. Certainly the NFL thinks they're going to be a lot better this year as well. I think the Raiders has a chance to do well. I think that they're going to, it really comes down to their offensive line. That's still the kind of their weak spot for them. We'll see how they do and how they hold up. But I think Pete Carroll will do some disguising to that, and I think that they'll have some success. I'm eager to see the Raiders. I want them to be good. So moving on to the Chargers. Tell me about this, the last team in the AFC West. What do you think about the Chargers? Obviously we talked about that, a really tough blow, losing their. I mean, you just killed them, losing Rashawn Slater, one of the best left tackles in football. Lost him that dreaded patellar tendon injury, the one that affected Josh Simmons. We'll see from that. I mean, you're going to have to, move your right tackle over. Fortunately, Right tackle is excellent, but then you have to kick Mekhi Becton out from guard to over to right tackle, and that's a tough one. So I don't know how I feel about them. I was really, really high on the Chargers, and with that injury, I kind of became less high on them. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, similar. Herbert's a good quarterback. They have a good defense. I mean, it sucks with the injury there. I don't know. I don't know what to think about. Like, is the needle pointing up or down for them? It's really hard to figure out. Other than and I keep going back to this because I think it's such a huge underrated thing. Is they were plus 12 in turnover margin differential last year. And if you regress that back to zero, then you're talking about potentially 3 more losses than they would have had. So I think the needle's pointing down on them, but I don't think it's pointing way down. I think they're a good team and they got a good defense and they got a great quarterback. And if they can shore up the injury issue, then they could tread water. But I don't see them getting better.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that too. I think that was a devastating injury for them. Obviously, Joe Alt's fantastic at right tackle. Flipping him over to left tackle is going to help. He's more natural at the right tackle position, but I think the weak spot is doing Mekhi Becton off, flipping him out to right tackle, and I think that hurts them. But from a we always look things from a profitability standpoint, and this is Harbaugh's team. This is really emblematic of his teams. Last year, again, with kind of a, not all the weapons, and the offensive line not being as great. They were against the spread with teams above 500, 3-4-1. With teams below 500, they were 8-1. So Harbaugh's a really good bet when you take teams that are below 500. That's an opportunity for you as a home gamer to potentially increase your profitability. We kind of talked about this off the air, you and I, about how there's several things in the big beautiful bill that were good, but one of the things that was really, really bad for gamblers was the new law for being able to deduct losses off your taxes. Only be able to deduct 90% of it. It raises that stake to that threshold where you typically have to be about 53% used to be a professional gambler and to be on the upside, and now raises that, depending on your tax bracket, to 57% or potentially above. And that's where I feel like I have always done well because I'm averaging around 60% as far as what I hit. So we're still staying profitable on that, but certainly I feel the onus and the pressure to be a lot better this year than I ever have been. So I worked hard in this offseason than I ever have as far as studying these teams, going to some camps, talking to a lot of people, developing those relationships, and really understanding where these teams fall. And I think that will serve us well. But it'll be an interesting deal. I know that Harbaugh is glad he's got Omarion Hampton this year, running back from North Carolina. A lot of people thought he was the best running back in the draft potentially. So Harbaugh likes to run the ball. So that'll be a great opportunity for them. It just feels like, for me, it feels like another make or break year for Herbert because we've been waiting for this guy to develop into this superstar. And I wouldn't call him Trevor Lawrence because he certainly had more flashes than Trevor Lawrence. But you just feel like this guy is this big arm talent. This guy is, he's this super smart guy. I think he's had like a 4.0 in college. So, I mean, he's really, really smart guy. But and there's a lot of comparisons to him in his early years to Peyton Manning and how he had this breakout year. And I think a lot of people thought that this year was going to be his breakout year. And I think that I hate to be the buzzkill, but that injury to Rashawn Slater just really kind of slows my roll on Herbert and the Chargers this year. What about you, man? Can you Do you have any signs for optimism there? Because I feel like I'm leaving things on a down note.
Yeah, well, I think again, the only reason like or a big reason why people think this guy's a bust, that guy's a bust, is their expectations we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
And and granted, where these guys were drafted, I mean, it's natural to think, well, we got the next franchise guy, the next, the next GOAT, right? And and so I think Herbert is a good, not great quarterback. I think he's top third. I think Lawrence, where he's at right now, is about middle of the pack, which is an average NFL starter.
Right.
I think this year it's interesting. I think Herbert has the potential to surprise to the downside a little bit. He takes a lot of sacks. And you got Lawrence, I think, with the potential to surprise to the upside. He doesn't take many sacks, and he's got a new offensive scheme. So I think those two guys could converge and maybe even trade positions. And you might be saying at the end of the season that Lawrence was better than I expected, and Herbert wasn't as good as I expected. And I think they're both actually sort of like good but not great quarterbacks. They're both top third, but I don't think either one of them is elite.
I tend to agree with you. Look, Herbert's clearly coming off the worst game of his career in that playoff game. Lost in the wild card round to Houston, got beat 32-12. Herbert just made some poor decisions under pressure. I don't think the offensive line did him any favors, but Herbert's got to deliver under pressure. But please stop telling me Herbert is elite. He threw 4 interceptions in that game and just looked bad. And, and he did that after only throwing 3 interceptions all year. But again, we kind of talked about it. We have to be fair because we talked about it, with Sean McDermott of Buffalo, like, hey, good in the regular season, but, when you face the elite in the playoffs, it's good to great. Are you going to be great? And that line is you see how you are when you're tested under that. And I just feel like that Herbert hasn't lived up to that, to me, at least what our expectations were. So we'll see how that goes with him, but it certainly is a bummer about that.
One point related to that, by the way, and this gets to your update on the offensive line situation, is that Herbert, even with the offensive line he had pre-injury, he was 6th worst in the NFL last year under pressure, on an expected expected points average (EPA) basis, right?
Yeah.
So 6th worst in the NFL with Slater, right? And so with Slater taking the injury, that has a potential to get really bad. And so that's why I think he could surprise to the downside and still be good, right? It doesn't mean he sucks. He could surprise to the downside and still be good. Is he great? No, and he probably will never be great. He's probably just good, right?
Yeah, we'll certainly see about that. Well, it's time to that show again. We've wrapped up the AFC East, but we can't officially wrap it up till we rack them and stack them. I want to hear your best to worst in the AFC West.
So I'm going to try, I'm just going to call it like I see it here. I think, the Chiefs are going to regress, but they're still going to finish first. I think the Broncos are going to trade places with the Chargers and finish second. The Chargers third, and the Raiders will be better, but they'll still finish fourth.
Our first disagreement. I'm going to have the Broncos winning the division this year. I think the Broncos take it this year. I think Sean Payton and Bo Nix are going to regress the upside. I think it'll be close, but I think that they take it. I think I'm going to go with the Chiefs number 2. Like you, I will take the Chargers third, and I'll take the Raiders fourth on this. Finally have a little disagreement here. We'll see how this plays out. Can't wait to revisit this at the end of the season with you, or as the season goes along. But again, awesome talking sports with you, like we do all the time on the phone. But now we get to do it for everybody out in the open, and it's good to go through these games with you, man, because this should just be a heck of a season in the AFC. And then, but tomorrow we're on to the NFC. the NFC East, and we'll see that where the AFC was so dominant last year. You saw that so many quarterbacks. I kind of feel like that this year. I feel like the AFC is still the stronger conference overall. But as Eagles proved, it only took one team last year. Only takes one good team for the NFC to win it all in the Super Bowl. We'll see how that plays out. But guys, thanks again for tuning in. Follow me at Uncle Phil's Locks on X and on Instagram and on TikTok. And please like and subscribe to YouTube here as well. And if you're more serious about it, please go to UnclePhil'sLocks.com. And I've got some exciting packages there for you. Weekly, monthly, yearly, all the above. But we're so glad to have you. And I am really glad to have the Frixer in here with me doing yeoman's work, breaking down the NFL. And don't wait. We're only halfway through right now. Still got 4 conferences, 4 divisions left in the NFC to break down. And also we've got our Super Bowl predictions in our final show, as well as we're going to do a little college predictions as well. So looking forward to those. Guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. And as always, guys, let's roll.